You can define plagiarism as the unethical representation of somebody else's work as though it's your own. It's definitely a kind of cheating because you're trying to take advantage of an opportunity that should not be available to you. Now, unfortunately, I see a lot of plagiarism working as a college instructor. And it's definitely something that, in most cases, could be avoided. I think the main reason why a lot of students plagiarize is because they just don't understand that what they're doing is a form of plagiarism. And the reason why is because plagiarism is not a simple thing. It sounds simple, but it's actually a much more complicated thing. As is the case with most things in life, there is a continuum of plagiarism. It's not like you either plagiarize or you don't. There are degrees of plagiarism. So I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about these different kinds of plagiarism that students unfortunately do and how to avoid it. Now, the main source of confusion for most students is due to the fact that there are different writing styles. I teach mostly psychology classes, and in psychology and many other sciences we use APA writing style. And in APA writing style, you should basically never use a direct quotation. So in other words, you should never copy paste from your sources. Now, it doesn't matter if you put it in quotation marks and give the author credit, you should just avoid it entirely. After you get a little bit further along in your education, maybe after you get your bachelor's degree or whatever, at that point, you could make a good argument about certain cases where it could be acceptable. But for the purposes of your first few psych classes, never do it. It's just not a good idea. It's most likely going to get you in trouble. Other writing styles like MLA or Chicago, those generally aren't really for the sciences, and they have different rules. Like direct quotations are generally acceptable as long as you don't overdo it. And always make sure that if you cite anything, you put it at the end of the paper. And in APA style, we call it the references section. In MLA, I think it's like works cited or something. Now, here is what I mean when I'm talking about there being a continuum of plagiarism. Now, as you can see in this image that comes from Turnitin.com, there are different degrees of plagiarism. Now, Turnitin.com is a special tool that a lot of instructors use to basically determine what kinds of plagiarism are in the paper. And Turnitin.com is actually really accurate at doing this. It does a really good job, but it's not perfect. So it's generally up to the instructor to make the final decision as to whether or not something truly is plagiarism. And the way you basically do that is you compare it to a chart like this. So, for example, the most blatant kind of plagiarism is simply like copying or cloning another student's work, word for word. Maybe the only thing that you change is the name on the first page. So that's obvious. Other pretty obvious kinds of plagiarism include Control-C or copy pasting, where you just copy sections from other sources and paste them into your paper without really making any changes or giving credit where it's due. Find and replace, that's another pretty blatant kind of plagiarism, where you copy and paste, just like with the Control-C method, but here you're taking extra steps to try to cover up your tracks, like you're changing a few key words. Maybe you have a thesaurus on the side or something like that. In my opinion, find and replace plagiarism is much worse than cloning and Control-C, because with find and replace, the student is taking extra steps to try to cover their tracks. In this case, the student is fully aware that what they're doing is not okay, and they're trying to hide it. Other kinds of plagiarism like remix and recycle and hybrid and mashup and this 404 error, these are also fairly serious, but these are more debatable kinds of plagiarism. It really depends on the actual paper itself and the course and the topic and all that. But these are things that will definitely, put up a red flag for your instructor. Now, what I consider the most minor form of plagiarism are the last two, aggregator and retweet. So with aggregator, here the paper is including proper citations and making sure to cite all of their sources, but there's really little original work. It's kind of like the paper is just an assemblage of various cited sources. So technically that's not plagiarism, but if your paper isn't original, if you don't have original work in your paper, it's plagiarism. Now, the last one, retweeting, that's when you basically do everything correct, but you're just kind of mimicking the original source's material too closely. You're not being creative enough. So those are minor kinds of plagiarism, and those are the kinds of things that most instructors probably wouldn't mind so much. Now that I've said a few things about the different kinds of plagiarism, I just want to conclude by giving you some advice on how to avoid it. The best piece of advice I can give you is to read whatever your sources have said, and then put it away. So if it's on a laptop, close the laptop. If it's in a window on your computer, just close the window. Get it out of your sight. And then, after you've removed it from your field of vision, try to write down what you just read. Like, just think about what you read and try to type it out onto your computer. Invariably, when you do that kind of thing, you're going to put it in your own words. It's kind of like you're filtering what your source has said through your brain. And the end result will be your own original writing. Of course, don't forget to give references. Don't forget to cite the sources that you got that information from. But it will be your own original writing, and you will not get penalized for plagiarism.